So I have got my chat box open. So if you do have any questions as we go along, that's the place to put them. And then at the end of the session, I will take you all off mute and we can have a live Q&A. And those of you who are able to stop with me and make and create with me, we can carry on chatting and making and creating as we go along together. So before we get on to this week, I thought I would just show you the finished version of what I did last week. So this was the cutaway wreath, which did change a little bit over time. I'm not going to show you, or should I show you the back? I always quite like seeing the back of people's work. So it's not totally neat, but you can see here the sort of evolution of what I did, that this was the yellow poly cotton fabric that I was ripped off to create a backing. And then I changed my mind and started going on with the gingham ribbon at the top here. So what I did with my pinned on leaves, in fact, you can see it just a little bit as I turn that angle at the camera, that where the leaves are starting to dry out and lift, it's exposing some of the bare polystyrene. So if you are watching this on replay or watching last time's video on replay, I think my suggestion would be to wrap the whole of your polystyrene wreath base in something. My preference would have been for the Hessian ribbon because it's got quite a loose weave and it would then be quite easy to pin your leaves on. But I found the polycotton and also the ribbon itself were too tightly woven to make my pinning easy. So I resorted to my dressmaking pins, my pearl-headed pins, rather than making pins out of pieces of floristry wire. But the decorator did sort of evolve as it went. Hanger up there, and it's been hanging on my kitchen window ever since, with a nice sort of Eastery springness to it with the eggs and the little nest in there. So I should put that to one side. Just trying to decide where to put it. Over the side there. And there's a little talk about what we're going to do next week. So next week you will need a straight-sided glass vase. So I've actually got one here that is rectangular in shape. If I had a round one, I probably would have picked the round one up. I don't know about you, but I always sort of have a go-to vase. And if someone says straight-sided vase, I automatically think a round vase. So it doesn't matter whether it's rectangular or square or round. It needs to be straight-sided, and by that I mean physically up and down straight, not that it doesn't have any relief pattern on it. You want to avoid, if anything, these vases that are quite fluted, where the bottom is narrower than the top. So just up and down vase. It doesn't have to be glass. If you've got a vase that is a ceramic vase that goes straight up and down, you could use that as well. And we're going to be using lots of twigs. Now my go-to here, as you know, if you've been watching me for a while, is I really like silver birch twigs. So I will probably be collecting silver birch twigs. I might, if I go on a walk and I can find lots of lichen covered branches, which are at least the height of my container, I might collect some of those. And especially with this changeable March weather, with some of it seems a bit windy today, so that quite often sort of flushes out all the twigs and whatever. So you may find that going for a walk at the weekend, you can pick up lots of sticks. And I might decide to do it all in silver birch, the decoration I'm going to show you. I might do it all in the lichen twigs, or I might do a bit of a mix and match as well. And I'm suggesting next week that you bring tulips with you. So it doesn't matter what flowers you bring, but you know, springtime, getting towards Easter, the tulip is the symbol, isn't it? Well, for me anyway, of this time of the year. And just have a think about the height of your vase in relation to tulips. Obviously, tulips will grow in water. So maybe when you finish your arrangement, your tulips will be quite short. Over the next few days, they'll grow a bit taller. So just have a think about that. How tall is your vase, and will the tulips sit in it nicely? And of course, if you don't like tulips or you can't get hold of them, you might decide you want to work with irises or daffodils, anything like that, really. So I shall put this to one side and show you what I've got ready for class this week. So my tray of goodies here. I feel a bit like I'm doing ready, steady, cook. So I have got jam jars. Some of them I've been really good about taking the labels off, and some of them I've been a bit lazy and I've kept the gunk on them. But if you want to have a really, really pristine jar, I normally soak mine in the old washing up water. and then it peels off quite easily, but quite often you do get left with this sticky mess. And the easiest way to get rid of that is I use white spirit. So it's much cheaper than, I know Lakeland do a product called, I think it's sticky remover or something, but white spirit is cheap. And I just dab it on with a kitchen towel and rub it off, and it comes off quite easily. But I've cleaned my jar out, but I haven't been really strict about getting rid of the papery residue. So it's entirely up to you what you do with that. I've got a selection of jars, so I won't show you those. And then I've also got a tin can, so you can do the same with a tin can. So again, it's all about having a straight-sided vessel this week. I'm not going to use my can, but just to show you that you can wash it out. Just be really careful with the cans, because this is a ring pull. I still do think that the inside edges are quite sharp. And of course, they'll be really sharp if you've used the the can opener to open that. And then what else can I show you? I am going to be using some dolly pegs, some old-fashioned clothes pegs. It may be that you've got, the more conventional clothes pegs, so it's just an option. I've got some little short sticks here, and I've used these previously, hence that's why they're all cut down to length. They look a little bit like licorice. Did you ever chew licorice root stems as a child? Look a little bit like this, but actually it's the chunky end of willow stems. So these willow cuttings must be 3 or 4 years old by now. I've used all the flexible bits to wind and make very natural wreaths, and then I saved all the chunky bits at the end, so I've got those in front of me as well. And then if you don't have anything like that to hand, I'm wondering whether you might have some kebab sticks as well. So I'm going to show you, it's one look, but sort of 3 different ways of patching your straight things in place. I've then got a few decorative items now, and this includes pastry cutters. So I'm going to leave you wondering about that to begin with. Pastry cutters. I've got my ribbons, so that's my pink, yellow and green, my small checked ribbon there. And I've also got some, if I want to sort of make things decorative afterwards, I've got the jar of eggs that you've seen me using. I've got my paper covered wire. This is optional, but if you have previously bought it for other things I've mentioned in class, it's another reason, to get your money's worth and use it again today. And then just hidden up my sleeve, not literally, is elastic bands. If you have got any elastic band, a couple of elastic bands, this is going to make your life a little bit easier today. But don't worry if you haven't, because we'll do a workaround. So these elastic bands are the type that when you have your post delivered, you always seem to pick up in the street afterwards. So they're really nice size and quite chunky. And I have also got some double-sided tape. I've got this tape that's on a little dispenser, and this tape's where you have to peel the paper backing off. That is not essential by any means. I am going to show you how I would use it as an alternative way of fixing your stems in place. And then, because I don't like to leave anything to chance, I've got my hot glue gun warming up here. For me, I think probably you won't need a hot glue gun, but just because as I'm teaching, I need things to happen and stick instantly. So I've just got it there to help me and to make my job a little bit easier when I'm showing you what to do. So what I'll do now is I'll put those bits and pieces to the side, and then I'll bring in my camera on my phone so you get a nice overhead view. And we'll start showing you what I'm going to do. I should perhaps show you the flowers I'm going to use as well. They're tucked in here. I thought I would use some spring flowers, and I've been around my garden, and I've got hardly anything in my garden. But I wanted to just show you, because sometimes you think, oh, I just haven't got anything I can work with. And when you've got nothing, there's always something you can do. So the only thing I've got quite a lot of at the moment are these begonia flowers. So you might know the begonia as with the big leaf, the elephant's ear leaf, that you can put into conventional flower arrangements. Sometimes you'll see people rolling them up to get a good look, a different texture to them. And I've got a few of the tete-a-tete daffodils, the mini daffodils. I have got hardly anything. I don't know whether you know what that is. You have to let me know in the comments. I'll come back to that one in a minute. And then some flowering currant. One stem, literally, that's all I've got in my garden. It just looks like a mass of shrubs in my garden, and a tiny bit of a flowering tree coming into bud, a tiny bit of cherry blossom, and then I don't know what this is. I'm tempted to say spindle, but I don't know. Perhaps if you know, you can tell me. Just little delicate yellow flowers, and one single snowdrop. Now I was in two minds about whether to pick this, but I thought nobody's going to notice one snowdrop missing in my garden, whether it was there or not. I think that's the thing about the spring flowers at this time of the year, filming at the beginning of March, that unless your garden is really, really abundant, you're not going to notice these things. So it's quite a good idea when you're, instead of sort of holding your hands up in despair, it's actually just to walk around your garden really purposefully. You know, mindfulness is a real thing at the moment. If you purposefully look around your garden and instead of taking it in one sort of fell swoop of this is just green and it's not very exciting and there's no colour and interest, just to walk down every bit and make sure you look everywhere and you'll find things nestling around. And one of the last things I found was some little stems of the blue grape hyacinth. So I'm going to put those in there, and look, I've practically made my own little spring arrangement, and to keep them going I will just put some water in. I don't want them fading whilst we work. And did you know, no, it isn't forsythia. No, it reminds me of my dad, because whenever every house my parents lived in, they always had a grape hyacinth with a forsythia next to it. It's not, Alison, you're right, the little buds here, they are laurel. This one here. So what I did in desperation, I've picked a stem of laurel. I've cut off the big leaves because they were just too big, too glossy, and I wanted something to say spring. So I have transformed that into a nice sort of shape of the bud. And again, it's not, the yellow isn't winter flowering jasmine either. I'll have to ask my husband what that is. I don't think, no, it isn't. It's got the stem structure of a winter flowering jasmine, but I'm certain that it isn't, but I shall have to report back when I send out the recorded video afterwards. So I'm going to put my jug to the side. Let's move on with changing the video over. So just a moment while I shuffle and move, and I'll come back to you. So you can see this is my jam jar. It is clean on the inside, but it's still got this residue on the outside edge. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my straight-sided sticks to this. Now I should say that this activity, this project isn't difficult at all. And I think what you need to, if you're thinking, oh, it's just too easy for me to do, the trick is to find more and more interesting things to put around a jam jar. And once you've got this technique, it's, you know, you'll have it in your memory banks forever. And it may be that once you see what I start to do, that you might think a bit, this would be a great project to use as an end of term gift for teachers. And where I'm going to use my little wooden sticks to go round, you might be thinking about putting felt pens in there or lovely pencils and things like that, and passing it on as a sort of end of term teacher gift. So this is a technique that you can use anything for, really. So I'm just going to stand that up there, bring across my little pots of sticks. So as I say, these cut sticks have been cut to approximate size already. So I've gone through and I've measured them up so they sit against the bottom of the pot, and I've been a bit flexible with how tall they are. If you were going to be really, really precise, you could measure up and you could get it to sit, you know, just a little bit above the rim of the jam jar and be really, really organised. And I've got a couple of options here. Because mine do go up and down, I could, number one, enjoy my sticks with that sort of is it crenellated, like a castle wall going up and down? Or if I don't like that, I can go back afterwards with my secateurs and trim them all off. So again, it's entirely up to you what you do. And then this is where my magic ingredient comes in with my elastic band. So take the elastic band and I'm going to wrap it round over there. Because the problem we've got is if we're trying to add sticks, I just need to, whether I want to go once or twice. No, once is going to be too loose, so I will have to go twice. We need to hold the sticks in place before we can fix them in place. So what I'm going to do is lift my sticks up, lift the elastic bands up and slide my sticks into position. So you can see here, this isn't difficult to do at all. It's just a little bit time consuming. And I wouldn't worry about getting them to line up at the bottom, because when you finish, you'll be able to give the jar a nice tap, and they will sit flush to the bottom. So don't spend ages lining it up. The job here is just to get on and have everything fixed in place. Now these twigs are well and truly dried. They're going to look like a little fence when they go around. If you're using sticks that are fresh and you're thinking, actually, I'd like to have this, you know, a little bit more long lasting, I don't just want to have it for this week. Perhaps like me, you want to have this jar and, you know, bring it out year after year. Just remember that your sticks will shrink a little bit. So if you want to get a complete coverage, you do need to butt them up quite closely. But of course, if you run out of sticks, you may decide that you want to separate them out. So don't feel that you've failed in any way if you decide you haven't got enough sticks. Number one, you could see if you could find some more, or number two, just spread them out more evenly. Or number three, if you knew you were having your jam jar positioned, you know, against a wall, quite often I have my jars against my mantelpiece or on a shelf, or just sort of do a front face to it, or a 3/4 covering, and you could have the back just bare. So don't beat yourself up if you think that it's not quite perfect, because it's all about just getting creative and working with what you've got, rather than beating yourself up that you didn't have the exact materials that you wanted. So I will go all the way around with this one. With the other two versions I'm going to show you, I probably won't complete them. I will just give you the idea of where you can go. Here you can see I'm starting to go across my the residue of the label, and because it's going to be covered up in sticks, you won't see it. So yes, it's nobody's going to come around and inspect whether you've totally soaked your labels off. I would say that I would take the majority of it off though, because you do get a tiny bit of a glimpse. So if I'd kept my label on of my jam jar, or I kept the label on of the can of tomatoes, you would see it at the back a little bit. But equally, if you've got a really beautiful can, you know, sometimes you get those cans that have olives in them that just look lovely on their own, you know, as a container. It may be that you're not bothered about covering it up, and you might want to show it off a little bit. So I'm rather hoping as I get round, I'll have enough stems. I can't advise you how many stems you need, because it depends how thick they are, how gappy, you know, how gappy you want the look to be, or how compact you want it to be. So I will come through and start to add the last few containers. I have added 2 elastic bands, you'll note. If you just add one, I found that just having one in the middle, the sticks bend a little bit, and it's much easier with 2. But if you don't have elastic band to hand, what you could do is tie a piece of string reasonably loosely around the edge, so you've got some space to put underneath. But the thing is, it won't sort of hold them tightly to your jar, but it will stop them falling apart. And it may be that you can slide them under a piece of string, and then as you come to do your decorative tie-off, you would just need to sort of massage them all in place. So don't worry if you can't find an elastic band. Tie a piece of string loosely around the edge of the jar, and you can do that as a workaround. There are other workarounds, and I'll come and show you a couple of other ideas to help you along your way. So I'm coming back. How many sticks do I need to fill in that gap? Let's have a go. It's like this thing, it's always one more, it's always one more. So I do want it to be quite close, as you know, quite tightly packed. So I will keep adding in, you know, one more. And that seems to be a fine, but I do just have one left. So shall I or shan't I? There's room for that one. So I've got all my sticks around the edge. I can give it a nice firm bottom like that. Make sure they're all sitting close to the bottom. Some of them are raised up a bit. Again, it depends on how you worked. Are you really, really precise sort of person? So you could spend a little bit of time lining those up. If you decide that you don't like the pattern at the top, you could put your first stick in and just be really rigorous about cutting your sticks the same length. I find that when I do that, I always seem to add on a bit or take off a bit, and that's why I would prefer to cut them once they're in position. But just be careful, you'd need to, these scissors aren't strong enough, but you'd need to lift one up and cut it to length and then slowly go, one at a time around the edge. So we don't want to see the elastic bands, they're not very attractive. So what are we going to do? Well, this is where your paper covered wire would come in. But if you've got the paper covered wire, or you've got some garden string, you can tie off like this. So I love the paper covered wire because it holds in place and I don't really need to worry about knots. I can just tie it, tie it in place. So my twigs are dried out. They're not going to shrink. If you are using fresh twigs, you'll need to be really, really tight with your fixing. When you come and tie that off, it needs to be really firm because your twigs will shrink over time and you may find they start to slide out a little bit. They come a little bit loose. So once you've got that fixed in place, you could either cut away or peel off your elastic band. And then you'd have a little decorative container. I'm just going to check that off there. A little decorative container that was all ready to add your flowers in. And really, you put your flowers in as per the little tin can arrangement I showed you earlier, and depending on how many flowers you've got. So this is more about making the container than arranging the flowers. But if you wanted to, we're thinking about Mother's Day around the corner and make it a little bit more decorative, that having got your little tie finish here, that you might want to, that's the sort of the workings underneath, that you might want to finish off with a ribbon, something like that. So I've got my pink gingham ribbon here. I'm going to pull off a generous amount. What I'm going to do is find vaguely the halfway point. Right there, and I'm going to wrap over. And again, it depends how many times you want it to go around. I'm going to go backwards and forwards just so it's got a nice wide bit of ribbon, and then tie that into a bow. So I'm just going to do a really simple little bow there. This is when you really want someone to be here to put a finger in the bow. If you do have a little helper, that would be rather handy. So just a simple shoelace bow, and then you can adjust that, pull the tails down, make the little loops a tiny bit smaller, and then when you're happy, a nice sharp pulling off there, and then finally cut to length at the bottom. So that would be one way of doing your decoration. You can see there's a tiny bit of movement with my sticks, but it'd be fine. You can organise and adjust. But what I would say, if you're carrying this around the house, is I wouldn't carry it by the ribbon. I would always put your hand at the bottom, because you may find you've got a stray stick that just slides through. So that is number one way of making the vase. And then the second way I really wanted to use was my dolly pegs. I thought they would be a really great, fun addition here to put around the edge. And I just happened to find these in a craft box. I think I must have been making angels or something like that for my Christmas tree. So I've got a packet of these, and I think these originally might have come from Wilkinson's. You can certainly get them online. I guess if you've got an old-fashioned ironmonger's in your high street. I should just get myself out a few to work with. I've also got one. I think that must have actually been from my peg bags. It's a totally different colour. Move this out of the way. So I've got these. And also, this is where my pastry cutter is coming in. I thought, wouldn't it be a fun idea if I could use something I already have at home, like my pegs, do exactly the same technique, but instead of tying a bow, hold them in place using a pastry cutter. So this does need a little bit of thought, to the extent that I've got the world's smallest jam jar here. I think this had either sliced olives in it, or perhaps even anchovies. So I've had to choose a container that will sit inside my pastry cutter, but also has enough room to get my pegs in either side. So here goes. So this is going to be, to begin with, a sort of feat of balance work. So I guess I could, no, I'm not going, I'm just going to do it like this. So I'm going to hold my pastry cutter up a little bit higher, and I'm going to put my pegs in around the edge. So they're all going to slop around to begin with, but they will start to stand up as they fill in the space. That's right. I think I can feel that now holding. I can rest and relax. It's not going to fall apart. So slide my pegs in. Gap. And I think I can still have one more. I think I need another one. You see that view above? That reminds me of the marzipan balls on a Simnel cake. So that's rather apt with Mother's Day coming up. I think that's traditionally when we gifted cakes to our mothers, wasn't it? When the young girls were in service. So if I hold that on the side, I don't know whether I can fit that one in there. But what I'm going to do to hold everything in place, first of all, I'm going to twist my pegs round so they're all facing the same way. I quite like that decorative detail, the little, so you can see the split. Just moving them around so they all look nice and even. I think that's about it. And then I'm going to push the pastry cutter up a bit to lock everything into place. So then it's locked because the pastry cutter is slightly smaller here than it is at the top. I really like that look, and I think it's quite a clever play on the stick technique here. And of course, reusable as well. That if you wanted to, you know, a small gift for somebody, that even a housewarming present, this would be really good. You've got pegs for the line and a pastry cutter to make, you know, biscuits and what have you. And you put your flowers in there, and you've got that to, you know, to keep as is or to take apart. And if you wanted to decorate it up a little bit, you know, let's get that ribbon out again. So it's going to be slightly hard to tie a bow on that. So I might take my hot glue gun out. Now, I like using hot glue because it's instant, but also it's not permanent. So when I decide I actually want to use my pastry cutter for pastry, for, you know, for biscuit making, all I need to do is to pull off the ribbon, and then I can flick off the hot glue with a palette knife, and it's all ready to be used. So I've just cut that to length with a bit of an overlap, make sure that's nice and firm, and then a tiny dot of glue on there as well. And there you have the little finished decoration or jam jar, all ready to put your flowers in. If you like the bow, you could, you know, do exactly the same thing, or you could make a bow separately and glue that in place. So one way to do that would be to cut yourself off a little bit of ribbon. I've probably got about, I don't know, what's that, about 20 centimetres, a little bit more. You make 2 loops and then tie them around each other into a knot. Again, not pulling tight to begin with. You always need to sort of dress your ribbon a little bit, making sure it's even. So it's a little bit of pulling on the tails, pulling on the loops until you're happy with what you've got. Like that. It's almost like this little hair slides like I remember wearing to primary school there. So pretty bow. So you've either got a real bow tied or you've got faked it up. So that's what we're about in floristry and flower arranging, is faking the look to make it easy. All your friends will be wondering how you can do such neat bows. So what I will do there, I think, do I want it on the front? I think I will put it on the front there. All my fixings are quite neat. I couldn't decide whether to have this at the back or whether to put the bow on the other side. I'm just going to have all my glue work in one place. So that will cover up that little join there. So that's the second sort of inspiration for you. The third one, it's going to stand up, is my kebab sticks. So exactly the same technique. I'm choosing another jar, kebab sticks, but do I have the kebab sticks short and cut them down, or do I let them extend upwards and create a container that's a little bit bigger? So what I'm going to do here is use my double-sided tape to hold my sticks in place. So I've got this double-sided tape that's on a reel, a dispenser, I should say. So you can either use it like that, or you can get this. It's normally got a piece of paper that you peel back. I couldn't fancy sitting here trying to peel that back while I spoke to you. So I'm going all the way around and cutting that off. I've got one track at the top, so it's a similar position I had when I was doing my elastic bands. And one track at the bottom. Cut that off there. So it's sticky. And then taking my kebab sticks, just be really careful if you do decide to, you know, as you work, because the ends are sharp, you don't want to be poking yourself in your eye, but you can do it and it will hold in place as you work. Now, if you do find that that is a little bit, it's not working quite so well, you can put your elastic bands on, but this is quite a good way of holding everything in place so that nothing slips. So it's just a bit of a belt and braces version of that one. And in fact, as I'm holding that, I think it's my fingers that are sticking to the glass and not the actual sticks. So I am going to adapt that and put on my elastic band. So hopefully there's 3 points of contact with the elastic band, which will come off, and the pieces of sticky tape will just hold things in place. And you'd probably notice that as I took off the elastic band on that one, the first one, that everything did momentarily slided, moved to one side. And this is one way of just having that extra bit of security. And I'm not going to go do any more of this because you can see exactly what I'm going to be doing, just going all the way around. But that just goes to show it doesn't have to be a twig you found in nature. You could use something that's in your kitchen drawer, and you could extend the height. So again, depending on what you're going to put in here, this one might be lovely, you know, with lovely tall daffodils in it, or irises, something like that is naturally tall. You feel a little bit guilty about putting shorter flowers in, or you could decide to cut it down a little bit. But do just be careful of the pointed ends if you do decide to use your kebab sticks. So I'm probably going to finish this one off later when we make and create together. But let's put some flowers into the vases and see what they look like. And here it's really all I'm going to do is a cut and plonk. So I need to remember to add water into my containers. So a little bit of water in there, a little bit of water in there. You decide what you want to do. So the spring flowers are beautiful on their own, and I think they don't want to be necessarily over arranged. So if you're just doing a little bit of a cut and plonk, I think that will look absolutely perfect. This would look lovely. They remind me a little bit of pussy willows on here. So not quite there. As long as I can get them to lift up a little bit, as long as their feet are in water, they don't have to all sit down to the bottom of the vase. You can hang them out a little bit. And here I'm balancing on between the heads of the dolly pegs, and the same with the cutout pieces here. You want something to show, you can rest it in between the little stem ends, the ends of the sticks for decorative effect. And these quite visually heavy, the beginner, but they'll be quite good if I put them in the middle and a little bit lower. I could then arrange my flowers through them so it becomes like a natural flower frog. I think that's probably going to be the best way to do it, because I don't have lots and lots of flowers to use today. You will hold up, and you just play really, depending on how many stems you've got. So what I'll do now is I will bring the camera back to me, and then I can show you these so you can see them sideways on, and then we will have a chat, and then we can get on with making and creating and seeing what materials you've got and how you would adapt the technique that I've shown you. So just bear with me a minute. So this was what I was making. So I hope you managed to see okay. So I mean, the arrangement, it's always easier if you arrange flowers at eye level rather than standing and looking down through a camera lens. But you can see here what I was trying to do with the flowers. When your jam jar isn't very wide, so that with this one, the jam jar is got quite a small opening. but normally the neck of the jar, the same as a tin can, is quite wide. So if you haven't got very many flowers, you need to be able to arrange them inside your jar, but to make sure the arrangement looks full and whole instead of them all sort of slopped over. So something like this with the begonia is quite handy. And I think I might even cut this down a tiny bit. So I just get a haze of pink showing.
I actually see that for you.
Over too far, and then you can use that as your flower frog. So my bow is at the front, so I would have to have the bow facing me, and then I can start to gently feed the flowers through the sort of network of little stems there, perhaps coming off at the side if I wanted to. That's got a funny little stick there, so I need to push that away, and then if I want to, I can lodge it between and prop things up over the edges of the little sort of fence wall that I've created. So they do need a bit more for flowers. For my taste, they need a few more flowers, but I'm going to go around the house. I've got my indoor flowering bulb, so I'm going to go, when we make and create later, I'm going to go through and sort of do a bit of gardening in with my houseplants and get use some of those as well. So that is the arrangement. So you'll have to let me know when we have a chat later which you prefer. Do you like the dolly pegs? So I haven't glued the dolly pegs together. That wasn't what the hot glue gun was for. The hot glue gun was to help me add my ribbon on really easily. And all of that comes apart. So you'd end up, you know, if you were gifting this as a housewarming present, the recipient would have, you know, a set of clothes pegs plus something for the kitchen as well. And then the other one, kept nice and neat, and as long as your sticks don't fall out. So I just say, as you're gifting it, I would always put your hand under the bottom, because you don't want to be gifting it and things falling out. So it's something that looks beautiful in situ, but because there is a tiny bit of movement on the twigs, and because if they're going from fresh to dried, they will loosen a little bit. And then if you wanted a really streamlined look, it's to continue on with the kebab sticks. And I think, and when we make and create together, to get a bit of difference in height, I am going to come up a little bit higher. And then it's like, how do you put this arrangement together? Oh, I'd already poured the water out of that one. I've got a little wooden dish here. So things sometimes look nice when they're grouped together. So I could put them all together like that. I'm going to, this has got a little bit of a dip in it. I might fold it over, one over that way. And you could have it then on a little sort of serving dish. Imagine I finished this one off at the back with some taller flowers at the back. And then you could start to, it's much easier with jam jars, because you could, if you had them on your table, you could then just lift the plate off or the mat off, and you move all three together rather than moving them individually. And then if you wanted some connection between them, some visual connection as well, perhaps taking some silver birch, and you could do a little loop, and you could perhaps have a bit of silver birch coming out of one and feeding through to the next one. And that's when those little bits of twig are helpful, because you can wedge them down underneath and sort of have them bending and bowing. Again, that would be something that would be left in situ. So I'm going to work on that. They're pinging out a little bit, but I will work on that as we make and create together. So I hope you've enjoyed that. I'm going to say goodbye to our recorded viewers, and I hope you enjoy watching the video. And please do send me, I love seeing your photographs. So if you want to email them to me, or if you're on Facebook, do drop them into the free Facebook group, Flower Start World. So I'm going to press the stop recording button now and take you back to gallery view, and invite you all to take yourselves off mute, and we will have a Q&A. And I think there's 2 of us here today that need to shoot off, so I'll make sure we come through to you first of all.